Hey folks, I'm Brett Kinsella. I'm the founder of VoiceBot.ai and Synthedia, and this is GAIN, the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week. We talk about the biggest news in the industry, and wow, what a week. Anthropic, big funding round. We'll talk about that. Amazon, part of that funding round, but also news from Bedrock. Meta, ChatGPT, an OpenAI mind-blowing valuation, a lot more. And to break this all down, I have my colleague, Eric Schwartz, head writer at VoiceBot.ai. Hey, Eric.
Hey, excited to get started.
All right. Yes, we do have a lot to talk about this week, and it's been covered in VoiceBot, in Synthedia. We do both. So if you're not following the Synthedia newsletter, definitely do that. Just go to bit.ly/Synthedia, but go to VoiceBot.ai every day to get your daily dose of news as well, and then the deeper analysis in Synthedia. And what I thought I would do is we'd start out with Amazon's up to $4 billion investment in Anthropic. Why don't you give me your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, Anthropic's been a very hot property, I'd say, amongst the non-OpenAI, non-Google large language model world. I think that they've proven that they can do basically everything that the more well-known players are doing, and do it with their own flair, as it were. And now this sort of investment just sort of proves that some of the deepest pockets in the technology world are seeing a big future for Anthropic, and that they want to make sure that they're not left out of whatever Anthropic does next.
Yes. Okay. And there's a lot going on here, and that Synthedia article, I'm going to go back to it in just a moment, but I do want to talk to people about this. So one of the things at Synthedia we are looking at the market of general purpose large language models. So the things that are just going to be applied to all the use cases. And our hypothesis has been for some time that that obviously OpenAI with the GPT family of products, large language models, is going to be the leader for some time, and maybe indefinitely. They actually may have solidified that position, but they are already a leader. Google with Palm is going to be significant because there's a lot of people who are just in the Google ecosystem. They're going to trust that. And will it reach OpenAI or not? That's remains to be seen. And this is not about performance. This is about adoption, right? And performance is part of that. But then we're like, okay, could there be a third in here? And Anthropic was the one that you and I have talked about most as being sort of the third player, sort of general purpose, broadly applied. And Anthropic could go either way. It could be the general purpose, or it could be domain specific in some domains, particularly that need that large context window with low latency, which is really the thing that sets them apart right now. Bringing them into the Amazon ecosystem increases the likelihood that they become one of the three broad-based winners in this space. There's a couple other things that are really interesting in this as well. So first of all, Amazon having Amazon behind you and all the people that use AWS, making it easier for them to get in, really significant. There's a couple other angles here as well that aren't really as specific to Anthropic, but they're specific to Amazon. Why would Amazon spend $4 billion and use that as taking a minority shareholder stake in Anthropic? Which also means that whereas Cohere just raised at around $2 billion, Anthropic is at least $8 to $10 billion, right? And maybe even more, right, in terms of valuation. So that tells us a little bit about maybe what the traction they have, other things that investors are going to consider, because there's no doubt that Amazon looked at Cohere, looked at AI21, some of the others that are coming out at like the $1 to $2 billion range, and they saw something that was worth a lot more in Anthropic. Maybe technology stack, maybe positioning, likely market traction is like a significant portion of it. But why does Amazon care about this? So first of all, they've got Bedrock. We've talked about the everything else strategy. They also have a 3-layer strategy. So the everything else strategy is the foundation model layer. And they have an application layer as well, and they're building applications. They're using applications. They want third parties to host applications on AWS. But they also have this infrastructure layer. And part of that infrastructure layer, the cloud computing, AWS, is the Infinium and Trainium chips. Those are alternatives to using, in some use cases, NVIDIA GPUs, the A100 and H100, which we talked about. Well, why would people trust the AWS chips, the Amazon chips, to run their AI workloads? right? Do they just trust it, or do they just like default to NVIDIA? Kind of like people are defaulting to OpenAI GPT, they're defaulting to NVIDIA GPUs. And what Amazon's saying is, hey, listen, we've got a better price performance ratio on some of these types of things.
Yeah.
What better way to get some great credibility in the market to take the largest context window solution, a high profile proprietary LLM, and have them say, yes, we believe in this. We're going to run all our workloads on them.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Anthropic's place has been not contested, but there's a lot of value. So many of the big companies see it as valuable. I mean, it's a founding member with Microsoft and Google of their the Frontier Model Forum. They're working with so many of the bigger names, and again, when they came out with that gigantic context window, I think it really it impressed a lot of people, and at Amazon, where they're trying to sort of come at almost an oblique angle to compete within the generative AI space, which as we've talked about before is also about cloud computing. I think that this is where they help set a foundation for larger future battles with the other companies in the same space.
Yeah, and I think just with context window, in case people don't know that, that's like how much data the LLM can keep in memory, like in terms of the actual activity you're doing. So you can upload a 75,000 word book
The short-term memory.
and you can ask, yeah, exactly. It's just the short-term memory. And just to give you a perspective, that's 3 times larger than the GPT-4 largest instance, which is not commonly available, by the way.
Yeah.
It's more than 10 times larger than the standard GPT-4, and more than 10 times larger than the other like sort of leading solutions out there in terms of in memory. And so there's just a lot of use cases that enables that others don't have. But it's also just like it's been viewed as fairly impressive what they've done before. The founders were formerly with OpenAI. They left there when OpenAI became for profit, and they started this public benefit organization. So I think that's like it's all very interesting. The other thing, like a little insider intrigue, could be that. I believe Google has already put in between $300 and $450 million into Anthropic, so they're have a significant ownership stake. So I'm guessing they were aware of this at some point. I don't really know, but if you look at Amazon, they're looking at the players out there. It's almost like they had to take this big move if they wanted Anthropic, because the risk would have been that Google does the same thing, brings it under their umbrella, and then they've got Palm and Anthropic, and there's less that they can offer to the market. AWS is sort of this primary first party.
Yeah, I mean, Google, they invested about 300 million. Zoom did some investment. They had some investment from more traditional venture capitalists. SK Telecom, the South Korean telecom giant, invested 100 million really recently. I mean, there's a lot of powerful names putting a lot of cash into Anthropic.
That's true. Yeah, and I think there was one round where Google did 300 million, but I think they'd put 100 million in.
Oh yeah, I think you're
right. And so, but the other thing about this is it just brings into clear focus the fact that the LLM wars are really just proxy battles in the overall cloud computing wars. And this is something I know people who have watched this before, read Synthedia, know I talk about a lot, or have been talking about a lot more recently. And this meant we had to update our LLM cloud constellation model. And so I just sort of point this out. And I'm not going to go into depth on this. We can talk about this another time in more depth. But what you can see is over on the left, Azure, they've got OpenAI. It's really strong. They're also, and there's a real focus on that. But they also offer Meta Llama 2. Google's also offering that, and we're going to talk in just a moment. AWS finally is getting Llama 2. NVIDIA sort of in the middle, working with everybody, both with the chipset, but also with Nemo and some of their other foundation models. And what AWS did is that Anthropic was just a little closer to Google before, and now it brought it strongly into its own orbit. Google has pre-announced that they're going to have Anthropic available in Vertex AI Model Garden. I assume that will still go forward. I think Anthropic will still want that to be available there, but it might make Google a little even less likely to recommend people use Anthropic. They're going to push people towards Palm and some of the others would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's those orbits are going to get more and more complicated, I think, in the not too distant future.
Oh, it's like gymnastics. I feel like it's a game of Twister when Andrew and I like look at that model and we try to like reorganize it based on where people are. But it is actually really useful. I've shown that to a couple people. In fact, I just showed that to a very senior executive of a public company. He's like, oh yes, okay, so I get it, right? And so like those visualizations really matter. We sort of see how the different deck chairs are reshuffling in the space and how the cloud players are so central to that. And yeah, just a parting shot. Like, you know, Amazon also wants AWS on there, or also wants Anthropic on there, and Anthropic using these because they want all the other foundation model companies to think, oh, AWS is the place I should really think about as well. They don't want all that cloud computing for training and enterprises as well going to Google and or Azure. Okay, so related to this, AWS, you know, they're just busy this week. I have the head of AWS Bedrock scheduled to come up on one of my events, you know, very shortly. Actually, they're going to be in a new event, which we'll announce next week as well. But they just expanded Bedrock. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where the line between what is Amazon, what is AWS can get a little confusing because it's an AWS product. Technically, they call it Amazon Bedrock, but it's essentially a way for companies to get to integrate with generative AI models, get pre-built integrations, get an API that means that they don't have to deal with some of the more complex elements. And it's been undergoing. It was announced several months ago, but they've been testing it out with some of their favorite companies, and now it's available generally, and also has some new models. They have essentially a marketplace for LLMs, and they've been they have there's Amazon's own LLM in there, but they also added Cohere, Anthropic, of course, AI21, Stability, and now they've added Meta's Llama 2 LLM, and as well as a new Amazon Titan embeddings. It's called sort of a narrowly focused LLM, but they're really trying to say, hey, if you want LLMs, if you want generative AI, but you don't want to deal with the hassle of all the custom integrations and things. Hey, here are the templates. Here's an API. You know how to put that in your system. Done. And they're really trying to encourage companies that already use AWS to think of it as their hub for their generative AI upgrades that are definitely becoming more and more common.
Yeah, and I think I get the impression, and like I haven't done the deep research. You're closer to this than I am. I'll look at it over the weekend. But I think Titan, they're sort of moving it more towards knowledge management, like optimized, which goes with the thesis you and I've talked about a long time, is that we're going to have a few of these general purpose solutions. Everything else is going to be domain specific, either functional domain like knowledge management, or industry domain like MedPalm, right? Topical domain and that type of thing. And that seems like very logical. And then we talked about this idea that's like, is there going to be 2 or 3 winners in the general purpose space? But then there's also in the general purpose space, those are the proprietary, we talked about those, open source or open models, which is like a slight variation on this, but open source, Meta coming in, Llama 2, like super popular, kind of amazing to me. Like nobody wanted to it's like Meta or Facebook was like the name that shall never be uttered like a couple years ago. And all of a sudden like Meta is like, back, right? Like people are like, of course I'm going to work with Meta. However, our thesis is that like Llama 2 is really important. Everyone wants to look at it. There are going to be some companies that are going to favor potentially another open source model. So we think there's another open source model which will emerge as well alongside Meta is the open source alternative to the proprietary general purpose leaders.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, Amazon, again, it's such a big company. They're doing so many things, AWS alone doing so many things. And it's telling that a sort of, not throwaway product, but a sort of like side project, their AI-assisted code writer announced last year and then released as just a free product. Like they didn't seem to be that invested in it. But of course, that ended up just being a prelude to creating an enterprise tier, because that is more and more the, I think, the way that people are thinking about generative AI is that, you have a certain version that's available for anyone or for small companies maybe, but if you want to really make money with it, you have a more powerful, better version that you get companies to pay for, and that's what they're doing with Code Whisperer.
Absolutely. All right, so Jürgen Gravestein said, is there any data available on how much API users OpenAI has versus Anthropic? Is OpenAI feeling the heat? I do not believe there is any public data. This is something I'm very interested in. I actually am doing some research, which might provide a small window. I don't think it'll be as broad-based as to be able to draw market-based conclusions. But it's a really good question. But one thing we do know is that OpenAI had a big lead. They had a lot of users already. OpenAI services from Azure has 4,500 users. And Anthropic is still restricted access, at least through Anthropic directly. Now, as it comes into the model gardens, there's more access. And actually, even through AWS up to just a couple weeks ago, and it may still be true, but things may have changed this week, you could only do a 12,000 data token context window with Anthropic through AWS. And so I believe that that it's not close, that OpenAI has the vast majority have tried it, and that Anthropic is coming up, and some of these other things are coming up. But as far as third-party APIs, there's some big wins by Cohere and Palm and a couple others. But for the most part, everyone's using OpenAI.
Yeah, I think there won't be any heat noticed by OpenAI until it stops being the first thing that people try to compare everything else to. I think that's the seed there for.
And it is kind of amazing too, because I tell people, it's like, well, everyone they try OpenAI first, and just to see, to make things work, and then they say, oh, okay, well, should I look at something else? And some just go with the momentum of using OpenAI because it just works, and they're going to be around for a while, and all these other types of things. Yeah. And then others start to think what are my alternatives? But then it's more effort. And I was just talking to someone, running an instance of Llama 2, just having up and running, $30,000 a month, just to have your playground. It's not insignificant. Okay, so there'll be more stuff on this coming out. This is GAIN, the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week, usually on Thursday. The last couple of weeks it's been on Friday, I think, mostly because of me, because I've been traveling. But Eric's been busy as well. It's been crazy logistically, but we love to do this. I'm a little bit behind putting these up on the podcast. I've gotten some complaints because I know a lot of people like to listen afterwards. So we'll be doing that this weekend. We'll be getting some of that stuff out. But we have a great time talking about this. And if you're out there, if you're on LinkedIn or you are on YouTube, give us a like. That would really be appreciated. But also let us know you're here. Just drop a comment in. Let us know that you're here, where you're coming from, and feel free, add a comment, ask a question. Like Jürgen just did. We'd love to incorporate it into the discussion.
You can always listen on YouTube afterward also.
You can always watch it on YouTube afterwards. If you missed the amazing first 5 minutes of this segment because you joined a little bit late, just go to VoiceBot's YouTube channel. Good point. All right, so next story today. Well, why don't we talk about OpenAI a little bit more? Because I was like, what, $90 billion valuation? That's got to be wrong. Of course, it might be 80 to 90 billion, and it's just being floated. It could be less than that. We've seen this before. I think it was Stability AI was talking about 4 billion valuation. They didn't even come close to that. Actually, Cohere talked about 3 to 4 billion, and I think they got 2.1. So a lot of people float these things, but there's so much to unpack in this thing. Okay, so what does this actually mean? Well, let me take you back 9 months. 9 months ago, people were like, oh my, Microsoft invested $10 billion at a $29 billion valuation 9 months ago in OpenAI to buy, to increase their ownership stake up to 49%. Okay, great. This is 9 months later, and people are talking about a 2 to 3x growth in that valuation. Oh my! So that question around about how many people are using the API. A lot of it is based on ChatGPT. We've talked about this recently. Just looked at the US ChatGPT Plus subscribers from July. This is 2 months later. That was a $500 million annual run rate business. We think actually, including international, it's closer to $1 billion business. And guess what? That Wall Street Journal article said, oh, by the way, and we've heard this from the information, they were trying to get, rush things to market and things like that. They're saying, oh, it'll be $1 billion over the next year. Nope. The Wall Street Journal says it'll be $1 billion this year. There are forecasts from December 2022 was 200 million this year in revenue. So now it's $1 billion. So that's a 5-time increase over what they expected. So if you think they caught lightning in a bottle with ChatGPT and ChatGPT Enterprise, you are correct. And if you think, I've actually done a little bit of the numbers. I think maybe even if we disbelieve those numbers that I said, for this year, the ChatGPT Plus revenue might be 500 to 600 million. So the rest of that is ChatGPT Enterprise with $60 per user per month, and or API usage, and so people just using tokens.
Yeah, I mean, I remember covering when Microsoft signed their sort of semi-exclusive deal with OpenAI, which included that investment, and there was some comments from people, the Wall Street type people, thinking that, oh, this is good, but oh, it's not worth this much, or Microsoft is chasing a fad. It's that whole thing about like what's a fad in tech, what's a fad, and what's a game changer, and Microsoft correctly realized that this was going to be a game changer and that they should be at the head of it.
And, we should just call Satya Nadella Midas if this is actually true.
And the whole, and then remember the it's the nature of these hype cycles where it's like there's always going to be articles being like, actually, it's ChatGPT is about to die, or it's losing so much money, or it's like there's all these problems. And it's not that the industry itself is invincible. It's just that when it comes to this kind of technology, it has staying power because it has both immediate and long-term obvious implications to making people to making tasks more efficient, to making businesses better at what they're trying to do. So yeah, it's definitely not a fad.
Yeah, I think that's clear. And the other thing, like, there's this other really interesting element to this, is OpenAI is not raising money at that. They're allowing employees to sell shares. Maybe some early investors do, but they just mentioned employees to sell shares at that valuation. Now they're pitching it to people. And so outside investors have wanted to invest. And they're like, if you will give us this valuation, 80, 90 billion, I know there's you can buy some shares from some of the employees. There's a sense that they might be actually trying to peg the market as well, do this share sale, and then come back and raise new funds for OpenAI for operating leverage at that new higher valuation. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it's there's so much sense of not being pegged to anything real, just sort of a sense of how much something is valuable right now.
Yeah, and nice comment from Olya. She tried to tune in yesterday. I'm so sorry. I tried to put out a note yesterday saying, "Oh, we're not going to do it today. We're going to do it tomorrow." But yes, I love it that people now think about this. It's usually at 11 a.m. on Thursdays. I think we'll be back at 11 a.m. Thursday next week. I had an unexpected trip this week, so that threw us off a little bit. But yes, 11 a.m. Thursdays come in. Matthew Kershaw had an interesting idea, and this is sort of off topic a little bit from what we're talking about, but what the heck? Is there any consensus on how to ground LLMs on specific company domains so they don't hallucinate, et cetera? The answer is generally yes. There's multiple techniques. I mean, the first technique, that people have been using around domains is fine tuning, and so that definitely helps. The second is the most popular term right now in LLM land is RAG. And that's basically, your RAG is your retrieval augmented generation. It is a database, a knowledge store. And when you use those, it increases your veracity rate, the truthfulness, significantly, because the LLM basically is basically looking at the database for its answer, and then it's actually just taking the information back, and it might be reformulating it based on natural language. So, but that is the most positive. And there's other lower level techniques. I was just having a conversation about this at 4:30 yesterday around some really interesting new research and this intersection of system prompts, user prompts, RAGs, fine tuning, and then data sets for foundation model tuning. So there's a lot more to come out in this space. It is right now an art as opposed to a science. People don't understand sort of the frontiers of that, but it's a great question. And Jürgen says, RAG is a way of grounding the model in external sources like text documents. And if you look at someone like Morgan Stanley, which we talked about, I think it was last week, who has a new bot out, they have 100,000 documents. They're using basically GPT-4 with a RAG in order to do that. And everyone's saying RAG. And Mikhail Stanislawicz says few-shot learning combined with a RAG. Also, and a great one. Also, proper management of the context window in history. Actually,
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
so there's a lot of emerging techniques, but that's like step one in terms of grounding. Great question. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, so let's keep going. So we talked about OpenAI, like big thing, and there's been some movement on ChatGPT. It reconnected to the internet. You wrote a story about this,
Yep.
and I did a little testing on it. So I think it's inconsistent. But one of the things that we had before is we had you could search the internet with Bing. They also at one point for GPT plus or ChatGPT plus subscribers, you could use their own like internally developed um, internet search through ChatGPT, which they disabled for about 2 months, I think it was, because they were having some problems with it. And in the past, when you wanted to use it, you had to go up into extensions or plugins, and you had to select that you wanted to do that. Otherwise, the model would just stay in the 2021 mode. And then if you select it, now it actually, it doesn't, it automatically tries, if it realizes it's not in its context window, it automatically does a web search and it activates Bing search at this point. So I thought that was actually very interesting that they did that they've sort of done this override. It works when you use like 2023. I find that if I just say this year, it doesn't automatically think that. It just says I can't answer that. And there were a couple times when it tried to search the internet for things that have happened within the last few weeks, and it threw an error. It's like, I can't find that right now. But it showed that it was thinking, it was looking at the internet. But there were 3 or 4 other times when it actually gave me the right answer. And I think there's something about how you phrase the question, which is not the way LMs are supposed to work. But right now that there's some interference running in terms of how the back-end logic works.
Yeah, because the issue was never, we have to make it more powerful or better at doing at searching the internet. The issue was it was too good and too powerful at searching the internet, so it was going behind paywalls to find information. And understandably, the people who paywalled their articles or papers and things, that they were understandably annoyed that ChatGPT was basically ignoring the paywall. So they had to train the AI to respect those scripts that say this is a paywall piece of information, and putting those limits on is not always it's not perfect one size fits all. So that's I think leading to some of the issues where it can't do anything because it's trying to respect those barriers.
One other pro tip on this is that when you are doing search, it's GPT-4 plus Bing, right? Which you would think would be the same as using Bing search, Bing chat for search, or in the Edge browser or elsewhere. It's not. I'm not saying that the answers are different, but I find that the answers tend to be more terse in ChatGPT than they are in Bing chat. I'm not sure why that is exactly, but that's just an observation. But we have more information on ChatGPT, and this is like
the big one
that we've been waiting for a long time. Yep. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I know. In 1 week, OpenAI has basically said, "Hey, this was ChatGPT. You thought it was cool. Now it's everything." And in this case, it's turning it into a voice assistant. It can understand human speech. It can respond with spoken words, and you can show it images, and it can parse them. And as we talked about last week, they're incorporating DALL-E 3 for the future as well. But really, what this says is that OpenAI is, or that ChatGPT is the kind of virtual assistant, voice assistant that so many ads and so many movies and TV shows, what they mean when they say, "Oh, it's a virtual assistant," that's honestly what this is turning ChatGPT to. And some of the examples I've seen are really impressive in terms of not only how well OpenAI or how well ChatGPT can understand what you're saying, but how well it performs at understanding complex or confusing graphics. My personal favorite, living in New York, is that somebody showed ChatGPT an image of the 8 parking rule signs that are on the street, and it actually understood when you could park there, which is more than I can do, honestly. So in some ways, it is more intelligent than I am in that regard. Or showing it flow charts from Pentagon briefings that are bizarre and unbelievably confusing to follow, but it puts it into much more simple terms, and again, just like being able to talk to it without having to look at the screen necessarily is a huge boost. I mean, we've seen a lot of homebrewed ChatGPT voice assistants, but this is saying like, hey, guess what? All we need now is a connection to a smart speaker, and you may as well, or a smart display, honestly, and you may as well give up on anything that Amazon or Google is doing.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so a couple things too. So first of all, like I don't have the image piece yet. Like I can't upload images yet. They said it's rolling out over the next couple weeks. On the mobile app, I do have the voice interface, which we could talk about in a second. I'm really looking forward to the image thing. So first, being able to generate images within ChatGPT, but also to be able to upload images and have it describe it to me, because I think like that's one of the reasons why it's useful for OpenAI to have all these different models: video, text, image, right? Is that they have the capability to like really expand this. So
Yeah.
now ChatGPT is a voice assistant, and by the way, the voices are amazing.
Who knew that they were
So
working
good.
on that?
Yeah, and like I was really surprised at that. So it was at Amazon when they did the debut of the new LLM enabled Alexa, and Rohit Prasad, their head scientist, actually debuted a new voice that's coming out. If anybody's heard, like Alexa is a very good voice, and it has been for a long time. But like you can immediately tell if you're in the space, and probably everybody else. But like it's just a higher quality, but it's not available yet. And then I hear this stuff from ChatGPT, and it feels like it's that generation. That
Yeah.
it's just so smooth. Now, like I haven't used it long form and all these other things, and like long passages might not be amazing, but really good.
Yeah, and I do wonder if, I mean, this seems to me at least to indicate that we're now reaching that point where um, we've seen it in many other technologies where all the various options are at a level where the average person can't tell the difference of quality. They're all just good. They're all, it used to be, it was like, oh, very obvious when you're listening to certain kinds of
Yeah.
robotic voices. Now, if they're all going to be at this level and better, which is starting to happen, then, it makes it redundant to brag about it. It's just an extra feature. Like, again, like the days when having a text box was a feature rather than just the normal thing to have on a website.
Yeah, and even back in 2019, we did some research. We had 300 consumers listen to male and female human voice actor, and then the same content for male and female synthetic voice. And a significant number of people called the synthetic voice is human and the human voice is synthetic, and sort of their unaided response to that. And it's just like we're so much better now.
And it's also, it also, I mean, we've written about many companies, SoundHound and so on, that have put at least some effort into creating essentially a voice interface for ChatGPT or things like it. And now I wonder, like, those specializations, like, do they go away? Do they have to, refocus where they're putting their energy? Because it seems like if other generative AI chatbots follow ChatGPT in this regard, then a sort of independent text to voice engine won't be necessary.
Yes, exactly. And all you ask is like, is it Google Assistant? No, like I think this is different. Obviously, those they're not collaborating. Google Assistant also has very good voices. In fact, it was actually research that came out of, I think it was Google Brain, one of the Google groups. Google Brain is my recollection, that actually led to this new sort of innovation cycle over the last 5 years. Like one of the people who was instrumental in that founded a company called Altered AI. But really fantastic. And what we have now is ChatGPT is an official voice assistant. And I think we can just go to this idea of digital assistants now, or virtual assistants if you want. But virtual assistants, like people use that term like remote assistants. I like the idea of digital assistants. I would like just to like say all that. And it's digital assistant could have text, it could have voice, it could have both, but it could be multimodal, could be single mode, but they're all digital assistants.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know if they saw this coming, but when Amazon withdrew its celebrity voices for Alexa, and Google did that a while ago, I do wonder if it's because, the synthetic ones are now as good or honestly better than what we were doing with our version of celebrity voice clones. And well, we can talk about what Meta's doing later, but they're just so everything changed so fast that what Amazon puts so much money into is now just not worthwhile.
Yeah, that's okay. Like that's the price of innovation sometimes. Like the next round comes up and surpasses you. Okay, so ChatGPT getting a lot more effective. There's this knowing and doing assistant concept. I'm not going to break that down here because it's a longer concept. I think a lot of the people watching probably know. If you don't, just like hit me up, or we've written about it a lot in CDD and other places. But for the knowing assistant, the knowledge-based things like ChatGPT, really like setting a new bar, which I think is really interesting. Still doesn't really have the doing things like task execution, which like Siri and Google Assistant and Alexa are really good at. So it's got some work to do there with plugins and other things. But there's another company in this space that also made some announcements over the last week. And I thought it was really interesting. I think we may have touched on this briefly last week, but I wanted to do a callback on it. And maybe we didn't last week because sometimes it's hard to remember what we do from week to week. But this idea of Bard with its knowledge graph, and I did have I tried it out a little bit. It's actually okay. It's for like Gmail search, it's actually better than the Gmail bar. And then it provides summarization. I thought it was pretty good. I haven't quite yet figured out how to use it with Drive. It drives me nuts that I can't use this on my Google, our company workspace. I can only use it on my personal, where I have almost no data. But I think this idea of I just wanted to point it out because I think there's something interesting here, is that Google is approaching this differently than Microsoft. Microsoft is having this idea that it's always going to pass. Well, it's got three layers. You've got features, which are generative AI. We've got Microsoft 365 Assistant, which we've talked about, which is the domain specific for the Office applications, the old Office applications, the other applications they have. And then you've got the Windows one, which is more general to the computing environment. But they have this idea of always passing through the knowledge graph, where right now Google is saying you can use the knowledge graph of your own knowledge, your personal knowledge graph. You can use it, but you actually have to proactively request it. Otherwise, we're not going to try to do personalization on the fly.
Yeah, and I think we touched on last week when we were talking about some of the Microsoft stuff about the idea of making generative AI part of existing products versus connecting existing products to a new system, in this case, Bard extensions. And I did test out the Drive thing, and honestly, it was great because I had a bunch of just sort of unorganized documents and files, and it gave me suggestions on how to put it into folders that was just cleaned up.
Oh, you asked it how to better organize your Drive?
Yeah, I said, what are the topics that are there? And it's these documents talk about this, these documents talk about that, because it's honestly old schoolwork even. And it was oh yeah, this makes sense now. These are much better organized in Drive to find things, and it's not just hundreds of documents in one folder. So it's great. And honestly, I mean, Google Bard is one of the ones I play around with. Obviously, a lot of these tools and chatbots, and Bard is one I haven't used quite as much, just purely because I am using other ones more. But these kinds of personalized extensions, even with the requisite asking it to do it, to me that's not a huge piece of, that's not a lot of friction for me. And I think especially for people like me and a lot of people who are around my age, I think, who are just so used to thinking of everything you do online in terms of where does it connect to my Google, where is it in my mail, is it in my Drive, is it in my calendar, etc. That I think it's a smart sort of subtle play by Google rather than upending the apple cart, really.
And there's been tools from time to time that have come out to just to search your Drive on your laptop and stuff like that, so you can find things more effectively, which I never felt worked very well. This is good. Bard is one to watch. It's gotten a lot better, even over the last 3 months, I think. Maybe with Gemini it gets even better, but I think it's really competent right now. And so people don't talk about Bard as much. I think they have more of a perception issue than they do a capability issue at this point.
As long as Google avoids social media, they're pretty good at what they do.
Okay, so hey, everyone, this is Gain, the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week. We've done this every week since February of this year, just to like run down the top stories. Eric and I are writing a lot about these. We talk about things that we don't write about, all sorts of different things, but we try to give you a little bit of the story behind the story. If you're on LinkedIn or you are on YouTube, just give us a like if you haven't already. We appreciate that. If you're on YouTube, like follow us, like do a subscribe as well. We do this plus a lot of other things on there. So we try to bring more info to the market, things you don't see generally. Okay. Oh, and we'll do winners and losers of the week towards the end. So if you're thinking of like who the winners and losers of generative AI this week are, put them in the chat or just tell us you're here. All the other stuff, like get engaged. We love that. All right. You want to talk about Meta?
Yeah,
it's mentioned it very briefly, and like, yeah, it's pretty wild. Tell me about what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I mean, Meta has played around with this before, as I mentioned in the article, and it didn't necessarily go very well. But now they have essentially their own version of a ChatGPT style assistant chatbot that's accessible through so many of their various Facebook Messenger, Instagram, and including the Ray-Bans smart glasses that they have, and their new the Quest 3 VR headset. And yeah, much like ChatGPT, it's supposed to just be a conversational assistant that can answer your questions and handle everything from planning trips and doing recipes and things like that. But it is good and useful, including in fact some generative AI image generation and other elements that are sort of tossed in there as well. But beyond that, they're looking ahead to this is what is Meta good at, or what does it have? A lot of it has influencers, it has social media, and so they're also putting out a bunch of generative AI chatbots that are celebrity backed, and they're making fake bios for them and everything. But the idea is that they're sort of domain limited in the sense of they each have a thing that they're good at, but they have the personality of a celebrity behind it in terms of not just the image, but also the character, and everything from talking about sports with a Tom Brady created character named Brew, or talking about lifestyle with a vlogger named Billy, who's played by Kendall Jenner, and my personal favorite, a choose your own adventure story guide. If you ever want to play that, it's his name is Dungeon Master, and he's played by Snoop Dogg. This is where Meta has an edge on in terms of consumer facing generative AI over others, is that people are very used to using Facebook and Instagram for their sort of parasocial interactions with celebrities, and this makes that parasocial interaction interactive, actually. And not all of them have all the features yet of the main Meta AI assistant, but they will at some point have more. And I do think this is going to be the introduction to generative AI for younger people that has not been around quite the teenagers who are trying to write their papers for school with ChatGPT. This is going to be the thing they do for fun rather than the thing they're doing
exactly. I think that is an excellent analysis. I love it that you broke that down. You and I had not talked about this before.
No, this just came out.
We've been too busy and we haven't talked to each other. I really like that breakdown. And if we look at ChatGPT, we look at Bard. I mean, these are productivity applications. There's like a business skew. It's not that you can't use them for your own, for personal, but there is that business skew to it, and that's okay. Like, people are doing that. When Dave Limp talked about Alexa LLM, he said, "Hey, we're talking about like creation, not consumption, right?" Everyone's talking ChatGPT. It's all about like for creation, like doing images, writing reports, those types of things. And like, it was a really good way to frame it and saying, Alexa is really about consumption. It's about people using it in the home to do tasks and to consume media and stuff like that. And so, we're taking this different tack. And although Facebook from time to time has flirted with being a productivity business tool, all these other things, and abjectly failed time and time again, they have a really big audience on the consumer media area. And you and I have talked about this. The next big growth in this space, we've already got huge growth, like on the productivity side. It's going to be these companions. It's going to be the entertainment use cases with LLMs, which is so much better. And Meta's got tremendous distribution. Like who's got better distribution than them? I mean,
and
so
a
it
Rolodex
just
of
seems
every
perfect.
celebrity.
Well, yeah, of course, like they have that as well, and but like it just seems like their properties really lend itself well to like not just having a great solution, but having distribution like immediately. And what's nice about this is they're not exactly just copying something and trying to repurpose it. They're trying to put it in their ecosystem. They're creating these new capabilities. Not that other people weren't doing it, but like there's been these other types of things where they just like purely just copy something that they see is going on. This is something we've seen some examples. ADOP in South Korea. You know, some people might say, "Hey, Brett, they're just really copying character AI." Okay, yeah,
But
fair, but like if they're not, character AI wasn't like in their ecosystem as much. They're on the web, so I think
and
that like this is a good move by them.
and it's not just that it's sort of quietly mentioned, but it's not just that they're paying these celebrities for their look or for their for something about how to create this character. I mean, by getting the input from these celebrities, it's Paris Hilton wanted a whodunit solving
Yeah, yeah.
detective as her
She's like
character.
the
It's like,
Nancy Drew of this
right,
era.
but
Yeah.
because it's, guess what? Now they're investing in it. They're going to be promoting it. They're going to be encouraging people to use it. And guess if people try one and they like it, suddenly they're going to try the other. Suddenly they're using Meta AI assistant, and now they're buying Ray-Ban smart glasses and the VR
Exactly.
Quest.
It's for the consumer. It's like shopping assistant, all these other types of things. I think it's
And
like
Meta
I think
knows
it's
Meta
really
knows how
clever.
to get people addicted to things, and this is could be the next one.
That might be a core competency of the company. Um, Elias Parker said AI21, what's holding them back from being one of the biggest guys right now, or are they? And I think like the answer is it sort of depends on what you think AI21 is. So first of all, they are one of the biggest guys. Like if you like
They're a
the
unicorn.
biggest players on the block. They're in Bedrock. They're in Vertex too, I think. Someone
Yep.
can correct me on that. So they have availability. Like the cloud providers pay attention to them. They have users, and then they also have a very popular app, WordTune, which is something of a Grammarly competitor. I think they would say it's more than Grammarly, and I think that's fair because it's more like this cross between an assistant and Grammarly. But any thoughts on that? I think they are a big player, but I think like domain specific, they're moving into this domain specific focus.
Yeah.
With their application, but also with their APIs and some other things. And they
Yep.
just raised money at 1.4 billion. I think. I think they have a very bright future, but they're not going to be OpenAI.
Yeah, I mean they have a $1.4 billion valuation. They just raised 155 million. They're part of Vertex. WordTune now is going offering enterprise solutions. They've created their own LLMs. They've created their own APIs. They have a platform for building apps that companies can use. They have a lot of they have a lot of products and a lot of solutions that are both for consumers and for the enterprise space. And I think that they're not they're not OpenAI obviously, but they are very much an alternative for those who don't want to go with an American tech giant as their provider. And they also have a lot of connections with not just with Google but with Apple. They were one of the first to make a Siri controllable mobile app.
Yeah.
So I think that they're not going anywhere for a while, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Apple. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that might happen. That the AI21 would have been one of the candidates for AWS to make a big investment in. They went with Anthropic. If Apple wants to make a big investment themselves, then this is definitely one of the players out there. But I think they're going to this domain specific. They've got a pretty good business model, so I think you'll hear a lot more about them. Yeah, they're going to actually be involved in an event we have coming up around just LLMs shortly, but we'll announce that next week. So more information to come. Great question, Elias. Thanks for asking that. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time. I want to do rapid fire on a couple other stories this week. And let's see. So because we just talked about AI21 and Grammarly, why don't we do Correcto? Give me your 30-second summary of what's going on with Correcto.
Yeah, well, it's funny because Correcto actually bills itself as a Grammarly for specifically the Spanish language, because one of the things that we do talk about, like translation as being and dubbing as being crucial for generative AI, but we do have this obvious English language bias, and anything that any companies that can do what the OpenAI, et cetera, are doing in English, but with a native appreciation for a different language, in this case Spanish, that's definitely going to be appealing. So yeah, it's a Spanish company. They're really trying to push into the Americas, because obviously South America alone has a lot of Spanish speakers, but it helps users write better. It helps them edit, generate text. It's a very useful tool, and again, they're aiming not just for consumers, but also going, obviously the enterprise route, but wanting to provide the same support that these text generators and text editors do in English for native Spanish speakers. So I think, it's a lesser tapped market. There's a lot of what's in English that we can make another language, but starting in another language is probably even more useful.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. We talk about domain specific, application specific, by region, by language. All these different things really matter. All right, so another story that you had was Mistral. They've been in the news recently, and they are back in the news again.
Yeah, so it's they're French-based startup. They came out of stealth a little bit ago with the $113 million as a seed round. But yeah, it's people from Meta and Google DeepMind, and they've created a 7.3 billion parameter large language model called Mistral 7B. But they've released it as, well, they call it open source, and it is sort of open source, but it's a free to download LLM that you can use for personal use or business use. But they're very much looking at the enterprise market as well. They're going to come out with sort of white label solutions next year, and it's kind of like Llama 2 in that, yes, it's a open source product, but at the same time, because it was built privately, the training data, the weighting is all private. So how much it is open source is debatable, but it is
open.
It's
an open model. Anyone can use it, right? But not open source.
They even put it on torrent websites.
Okay, well, there you go. All right, so very interesting. We talked about MetaLlama being sort of one of the open source players, one of the open players. Everyone's trying to figure out, can they get that second slot in that category? Will it be Mosaic ML? Will it be TII with Falcon? Will it be Mistral? I mean, it's wide open. So I think that's super interesting. You and I both wrote about Getty this week. And what they basically did is they said, hey, we don't allow generative AI imagery in our platform. We don't want anyone to use it. They've done lawsuits on these things, but they said, hey, we've done this commercially safe thing. And basically they're saying, hey, we've used our own data, our own licensable IP that we have. We trained a new text to image generator using NVIDIA Picasso. And what you get out of that big company or anybody else is you get something that's going to be super high quality. It is, and we will basically indemnify you. Like, there's no risk that you're going to get sued for using the wrong copyright. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think they're really just trying to protect their like high value franchise, that goes beyond just like taking photos at like sporting events and things like that.
Yep.
They charge a lot of money. They're a premium player in this space. They're trying to protect their margin. And they're doing it in like, we're protecting the creators, but I think they're really protecting their business. But still, I think this is going to appeal to a lot of corporations who might be worried about some of these things.
Yeah, and it's telling that they turn to I mean, can't believe we haven't talked about them nearly as much as we normally do, but they work with NVIDIA's Picasso model to train it. So there's even less of a concern that they're relying on LLMs that have been potentially tainted in people's minds for using using materials they should have licensed without licensing them. And yeah, it's like we talk about, like it's going to be a basic feature. Any image providing a database is going to need some sort of AI image generator, whether it's Adobe or Getty or whoever. And I think that this is a smart way to do it to avoid any potential issues. And I don't know, they're not clear about how they're compensating artists,
like
but
that.
the fact that they say that they will is itself a big concession that
there's a lot of hand waving going on there. Like we'll see what happens in the end. I think there's going to be a lot of artists who are going to complain about that, and probably rightfully so. Okay, let's do winners and losers of the week. I will start with the loser. I think it's losers. I think Amazon, Apple, and Google, have a new competitor in their wake. And in fact, they have a couple new competitors in their wake. And I just think that ChatGPT with the voice, what Meta's doing on the entertainment companionship side, I think is really just going to further pigeonhole the existing voice assistants, the doing assistants. I think it's going to be tough for them. What about you? What do you think? You can comment on that, or you can just give us your loser.
No, I mean, I do definitely agree with that. I mean, I honestly, in terms of losers this week, I think it's anyone doing anything in technology that wasn't generative AI, because everything was swamped by between Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Google. Like, no one wants to hear anything else that you're doing in technology if it doesn't have the term generative AI in it.
It's insane. I was just talking to somebody about this who's like sells technology, broad-based technology to like large enterprises. It's like
there are other kinds of technology, but nobody cares right now.
Yeah, it's just like they're doing existing projects, but like net new projects are all generative AI for sure. All right, who's your winner for the week?
I'm going to say I'm going to say Hollywood because we didn't touch on it, but the Writers Guild just got a great deal. They got almost everything they wanted, including rules about AI writing being employed by Hollywood studios, and nothing shocking. Just basically saying like, hey, you can't just use it and not say that you're using it. You can't try to force writers to use those tools or use the writing produced by AI. I think that it's a genuinely solid win for the Writers Guild, and hopefully one that will prevent producers from just relying on the lowest common denominator ChatGPT produced scripts, which are they're really not that good. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, fair enough. So my win is AWS, which seems like kind of like, is that a Pyrrhic victory? They're spending $4 billion to take a piece of a company. But I think it just makes, so they got Llama 2 now. So they sort of filled that gap. Those very popular. You could use it through SageMaker, but it was hard right now. So that's going to be really important. They've got this pole position with Anthropic. And in particular, they've got a featured Spotlight client that is going to be running all their workloads on it. And they're going to give more credibility to the Trainium and Inferentia chips. And that's going to lead more enterprises to start using AWS for their AI workloads, and particularly those chipsets, the internal Amazon things where they don't have to spend money on NVIDIA GPUs. And by the way, if there's this alternative to NVIDIA GPUs, the price premium won't be able to sustain as much longer. So the price is going to come down for buying. AWS is still going to buy a lot of NVIDIA GPUs for AI workloads, but the price will come down a little bit because there won't be as much demand. So that's my prediction over the next 12 months. I think they're a big winner in this. And Mikhail Stanislavic says Anthropic. Well, of course. I mean, yes. They just got either they got a $4 billion check, or they got $4 billion in free cloud computing, whatever it is. Yes, they just elevated themselves from a potential top tier to the top tier with one 100%. Announcement. Pretty impressive. All right, folks. This is the Generative AI News Rundown. Eric Schwartz, thank you very much.
Yep. Can't wait for next week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, could it be bigger than this week? We always wonder. All right, Generative AI News Rundown. Come back to us next week. Check this out on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Read voicebot.ai. Subscribe to Synthedia, bit.ly/Synthedia. And when you come back, just hit us up. Follow us on LinkedIn. Let us know what you think about the space. Thanks so much for joining us once again. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.